First of all, thanks for having me. I've been wanting to visit Taiwan for a long time now, so it's really good to be here. Very, very beautiful country. I'm enjoying it. So, yeah, anyway, I'm Doug, and I co-run a small indie game studio called Die Gute Fabrik, which is German for the good factory. We like to pretend that this is our office on this cliffside. That's not really the truth. Here's some of us. Actually, we're distributed around the world. So I live in New York. Nils over there lives in Copenhagen in Denmark. George, one of our programmers, lives in London. Alessandro is from Italy. So we very remote and work with each other over the internet in large part. Unfortunately, not in a giant factory. I am probably best known for a motion control game called Johann Sebastian Joust. And in this talk, I want to talk about the game, but also my personal history, and try to draw some lessons from my years in the game industry, and specifically making indie games. To give you a better idea of where I'm coming from and what the game is, we're going to do a little demo and play it on the stage so you can see what the game is. Is the sound? Oh, yeah, okay, good. Okay, so let's get some. We're going to play with 3 players. It's a game for 2 to 7 players, multiplayer motion control game. They're going to play a quick round on the stage.
Johann Sebastian Joust.
So what's going to happen is it's a game where you don't want to move your controller too fast. There's a accelerometer. It's a PlayStation Move controller from Sony's PlayStation. When Rami registers in a little bit, the round will start, and you want to be the last player left standing. Yeah, let's give it a try, and you can see what it's like.
Get ready to joust. Go. And the winner is
yeah, thank you for the volunteers. Jump back into the... Great. Right, and so that's a game. Even though you saw there were graphics on the screen, but in fact it's a face-to-face game. So all you need to do is look at the light on this controller to see if you're out or not. So it's a kind of a physical game that's not quite a video game. It's more a music-enabled, technology-enabled playground game played in front of the screen. I've been very fortunate with the game. It's gone on to win a number of awards. Here's one that I'm pretty proud of that was mentioned in the nice intro, the Innovation Award at the Game Developers Conference. That's been really humbling and really nice. More recently, I released the game on PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 as a part of the Sportsfriends game. Sportsfriends is a collection of a few multiplayer games, including the Johann Sebastian Joust game that you just saw. And it was published a few months ago on the PlayStation Network. And so that's kind of what I've been doing more recently. But getting here was a very long journey. It took a lot of years and a lot of learning and a lot of lessons. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this talk. Specifically, and here's me and some of the other Sportsfriends developers. Specifically, I want to talk about collaboration. Now, this on the surface of things seems a little boring. Like, we all collaborate. Even in independent games, we're used to working in small teams. Maybe an artist and a programmer work together to make a game, or a sound designer and a programmer, or whatever. So we're all familiar with collaboration, but I think in the game industry, we tend to think of collaboration in a very conservative way. So, okay, I'm going to make a studio, and I'll hire a programmer, and an artist, and a sound designer, and together as a studio, we'll build this game or that game. But collaboration can look a lot more radical than that, and there's many different ways to collaborate. And so I want to just tell my own story and hopefully inspire some different ways of thinking about collaboration that aren't quite the traditional way that you think about collaborating in a traditional studio structure. Okay, I'm going to tell a few stories, 3 stories. So story number 1 is about a game art collective I worked with in Copenhagen called the Copenhagen Game Collective. Okay, so 7 years ago, feels like a long time ago, I moved to the country of Denmark in Europe to do my PhD in video game design. I got to know a bunch of the students there, and we talked a lot about games and cool game ideas, and worked with each other and got to know each other. And then in 2008, a small group of us worked on a game at the Nordic Game Jam. How many of you, just so I can tell, have participated in a game jam or know what a game jam is? Raise your hand. Some people? Okay. So I'll explain briefly what it is. A game jam is usually a small event, 24 hours, 48 hours. This one was a weekend game jam, where you get a theme and you work in small groups or alone to make small, tiny games, prototypes. And so this is early 2008. Group of us for a weekend got together at this game jam to make a game. The theme of the game jam was cultural taboos, and so we thought it would be really funny and a little transgressive to make a game about sex, which is kind of an awkward topic not dealt with very often in the video game industry. And so what it was a no graphics game, sound only, played on a keyboard for 2 to 4 players, and it was an experimental art game about exploring sex and how people react to it. So you kind of work together with your partner, and their kind of embarrassing orgasm noises coming out of the computer, and you're trying to hit a rhythm to reach climax. Actually, it was it was almost like a joke, and it was a silly kind of art piece, but it was very well received, so we decided to keep working on it because people seemed to like it. We decided to make it motion control enabled, so we made it for the Wiimote, kind of to make it a little bit more performative and subversive, and we wanted to subvert the kind of Nintendo family-friendly rhetoric. Let me just, the risk of embarrassing myself, let me just show you a video of what this looks like. So you shake your controller. You see this is going to speed up. You're trying to hit the correct rhythm. No graphics, so just sound and rumble in the controller. Okay, and it goes on, and then you'll see. Oh, okay. So it gets faster, and eventually okay, they win. They won the game. It's a collaborative game. So you get the point. Got it. Okay. And the whole point of the game is to be a little embarrassing. So you can see that poor guy in the back, like, can't really deal with it. But it was really cool. We submitted it. This is still back in 2008 to a bunch of art exhibitions, game exhibitions. And we were very fortunate. We got to go to IndieCade 2008. We even won an award there. I got to tour it around in a few different cities. Independent games were really picking up at that time in the States and in Europe. People were very interested in these strange, experimental, artistic games. And this was great. Now, we were never really going to be able to sell Darkroom Sex Game. It was never going to be a commercial project. But it was very important for me, and I think for us, for a number of reasons. One, we felt like we were onto something. We were on the verge of a big idea, which is the idea of physical play, performance play, and motion control, and doing cool things with motion control, weird and cool things with motion control in the indie space. So we felt like, okay, well, maybe not Darkroom Sex Game could be commercial, but this general idea is exciting. We felt like we were onto something. Two, we got to travel around to a few cities and show the game and meet other independent game developers, which was very inspiring. And slowly we became a part of this international indie game scene, getting to meet other developers, learning from them. And in fact, at IndieCade, we met this guy, Nils Dineken. It turned out he also lived in Copenhagen. We didn't know him until we both went to IndieCade and met each other. It was, wow, you live in Copenhagen, we live in Copenhagen. And we became friends with him, and I don't know why I did that, and ended up going back to Copenhagen and making games with him. In fact, this guy is now my business partner in Gute Fabrik, so over time got to know him better and better. And so, you know, Darkroom Sex Game was really important for us, getting to know people and building connections and meeting colleagues. So, like I said, we all got back to Copenhagen and started working together on all sorts of games, physical games, card games, browser games, all sorts of games. And so we decided to band together and brand it all in this art collective, which we called the Copenhagen Game Collective. And the idea was to take all these little ideas and prototypes that we were working on and give it one identity. This was important because, one, talking to the press and the outside world, we could band these projects together and they'd understand you know, who we were, the Copenhagen Game Collective. But it was also important for ourselves because it kind of gave us an identity and something to work towards. You know, it made us feel like we were part of the team. So this was really cool. We also started organizing parties and events and exhibitions. So for example, we worked with the Nordic Game Conference, which is a very big conference in Scandinavia, in Sweden. And they didn't know very much about indie games. We did, because we were indie game developers. And so we partnered with them. We offered to run this exhibition for free if they would let us invite some speakers and give us a space to run the exhibition. So it was a really nice partnership, kind of a win-win situation. So we organized this indie games exhibition and got to invite cool speakers. And over time, you know, throwing these events and parties, we started helping build this scene, this indie games thriving scene and culture in Copenhagen. And that was really inspiring and helpful for us because it was a good way of meeting other developers and getting excited about what we were doing. Throughout all this, we started working on more crazy game ideas, and we came up with this really crazy game called Brutally Unfair Tactics, Totally Okay Now, which we just called Button. This was actually a game. We came up with this crazy idea at my birthday party. We were sitting around drinking, and there was an exhibition at GDC that was taking submissions for one-button games. So we were like, oh, we should submit something. So over beers, we came up with this crazy idea. And here's how it works. It's a party game. The game tells you to take some number of steps away from the computer. So you put down your controller, and you, follow the directions. You take the steps back. It tells you to do something very weird, like spin around 4 times, jump up and down, act like a monkey, close your eyes. You never know. It's randomized. And then it says go, and the race is on. You actually have to sprint across the room to the computer, to your controllers. And there's usually a win or a lose condition. So, for example, first player whose button is held for 4 seconds wins. In the real world, it looks like this. So people, sprint to the controller and wrestle over the controller. So it's meant to be a physical game that's focused on this kind of brawl in front of the computer. And again, this was really cool. It was a weird but exciting idea, and we got to show it at IndieCade again, and even at the IGF, the Independent Games Festival at GDC. And so, again, it was really valuable for us to exhibit this game and meet people around the world. And this weird game idea ended up almost becoming like a passport for us to travel to these different events and meet people. We even ended up getting the game onto Steam, which was pretty amazing. Now, again, this game is pretty weird, and we knew it was going to be a huge moneymaker for our company. But again, this was really valuable. It gave us experience in terms of marketing the game and putting it on Steam. So slowly, we were kind of learning our way of what it meant to make bigger projects and more ambitious projects. Also importantly, we were starting to attract more media attention. So this is a very major Danish newspaper that kind of wrote about us and our games, and not just this button game, but our whole design philosophy. So we were starting to get known for party games, but specifically designing physical games that focus on the world, the real world in front of the screen, not the fictional world inside the screen. And at the time, there weren't so many indies making these kinds of games, so we had this kind of unique style and genre that we were going for, and the press was kind of catching on to this narrative. We decided to work on something a little bit more commercial. So here is a Wii prototype we worked on. It was a wizard dueling game where you would face your opponent and cast spells. Now, this project didn't end up working out. We worked on it for a couple of years and decided it wasn't fun enough, so we abandoned it. But we learned a lot of really valuable lessons in the process. My colleagues, some of my colleagues in the collective who run a game company called Knapknock Games in Denmark recently released a Wii U game called Spin the Bottle, a physical party game that took a lot of the lessons that we learned while making this prototype. And I took some of those face-to-face gaming ideas, and at the 2011 Nordic Game Jam, I prototyped a music-based face-to-face dueling game, which of course would end up becoming Johann Sebastian Joust, the game that you all just saw. So that's kind of the arc of the Copenhagen Game Collective. Now I wanted to, just thinking about this story, I wanted to pull out some lessons and themes to kind of figure out, okay, well, why was I telling you about all this? I think one important theme there is, this idea of finding, and Rami talked about this in his talk as well, but this idea of finding a recognizable style and purpose. And so, for example, for us, it wasn't just about one game, some particular game. It was about a whole body of work and some broader vision of purpose, which for us was party games that focused on the real world in front of the screen. So that was a nice, kind of succinct design philosophy that people understood and were interested in, and we kind of branded that under this art collective that we were running. And I want to point out, this is something that we were able to do only together as a big group that could work on all these different games and could get together over beers and come up with these crazy ideas. So this was very much kind of like from this social experience and the scene in Copenhagen that we were able to make all these games. The other lesson is this idea of building a local scene, I guess that's how we would call it, and this idea of getting involved in the broader games world. So for us, like throwing these events and going to these events, obviously it was fun, but it was also very useful. It gave us a great environment in which to think about and discuss games. Like for example, if we hadn't been drinking beers and at my birthday party discussing game ideas, we never would have come up with that button game. It was also a great way to meet other developers, other potential collaborators. And so I think it's easy to just kind of get stuck in an office somewhere, just working on your company or working on your game. But actually being involved and meeting people really opens up a lot of doors. And it's been not just important for me, but a lot of other developers I know. This idea of, like, again, the Copenhagen Game Collective wasn't a traditional studio or company. It was more of an art collective, a loose collective of developers and artists. And that opened up opportunities we wouldn't have had if we were a traditional company. we got to throw art exhibitions and partner with organizations to help invite speakers. And so, as an art collective, we could do things that a company couldn't. So, it's just another way of thinking about collaboration. And finally, doing all of this takes a lot of time, right? This was not overnight. I mean, we met, so for example, I met Nils back in 2008, and it was only 4 years later when I was really working on Johann Sebastian Joust, and we were at GDC getting this award. So this took many projects, multiple games, years of working on some projects. Some failed, some successful. And this is another reason I really like working together with different people, because alone, this would be a very lonely, long road. But together with friends and really interesting colleagues, it was much more tolerable to go through this long and slow process of building up skills and a name and talent. Right? Okay, story number 2. This one's about Sportsfriends, the PlayStation game I told you about. Okay, so it's 2012, and I have this game, Johann Sebastian Joust, and that's cool, and people are interested in it, and I've been able to show it at art exhibitions. But what was I going to do with this game commercially? Could I ever release it? It's a very weird game, right? Like, it requires these strange controllers and multiple players. So it's kind of a very weird game. But I knew that people were interested, right? Like, I would go around to exhibitions and conferences like PAX or GDC, and people loved playing it. They were enthusiastic about it. But still, the question was, like, even if Sony was interested in me putting it on the PlayStation, would people ever buy such a weird, niche, specialized game? So at the time, I didn't really know what I was going to do with this game. I was really struggling, like, well, this game is cool, but can I do something with it commercially? Okay, meanwhile, throughout all of this, I was traveling a lot to New York. Even though I lived in Copenhagen for a while, I'm originally from the New York area. And so I'd go back and visit friends and family, and in fact, there's a lot of really cool game developers in New York who I would visit. One of these game developers, Ramiro Corbetta, who I met in my travels in New York, who's another independent game developer, was working on a small 2 versus 2 sports game called Hokra. The idea is you're trying to bring that ball, that little puck, into the zone of your color, trying to fill up your zone. And I really loved this game. It was very simple, but extremely fun and very well balanced, and really made an impact on me. I just absolutely love playing this game. So Ramiro, like me, was interested in this idea of what we call local multiplayer. So the idea is, getting people together in the same room to enjoy video games together. So not, over the last 15 years, we've seen a lot of online gaming, people playing around the world, connecting to servers, alone in their room playing MMORPGs or StarCraft or whatever. And that's fine and all well and good. But we were really interested in this idea of, okay, let's go old school and try to bring people together back to enjoy each other's company in the same room. So we were very interested in this idea of local multiplayer. But Ramiro, like me, had a problem. He knew the game was good, but it was a very specialized and weird game. It required 4 players. You needed 4 controllers. You couldn't play with a keyboard. And he wasn't very interested in making AI or a single-player mode. And he didn't really want to make an online version of it because he was mostly interested in local multiplayer, getting people together. And so the game was probably a little too weird and small to sell on its own. And so, so it was a very similar problem to what I had with Johann Sebastian Joust. So meanwhile, in this environment, in fact, there were a lot of developers getting interested in local multiplayer. Our friend Bennett Foddy, who's probably best known as the developer of Quap, if you've ever played it, a browser game, had made another browser game called Pole Riders. It was a 1 versus 1 dueling pole vaulting game. And so, interesting, another multiplayer sports game that we liked. Our friend Noah Sasso, also in New York City, made a volleyball-like fighting game called Barbari-Ball. And so the four of us got together and were like, well, you know, maybe our games are a little too weird to release on their own, but what if we got together and put all our games together in a compendium? So we thought of things like Summer Games back from many years ago, or Wii Sports, right? Like a collection of smaller games. And the idea was that like maybe we could form a kind of super team and make for an interesting story, and we could create a product that was big enough and substantial enough that it would actually make sense commercially, as opposed to all these tiny little games that were a little too weird and too specialized to sell on their own. So we got together and we made this, we branded it Sportsfriends is the name of the compendium, and it includes all those 4 games I just talked about. And you know, I think I really like the title of this game. I think this idea of friends applies to, you know, what we wanted to get people, we wanted people to make friends and get together with their friends in person to play these games. But it also helped drive home the narrative of us, the developers, as friends, as the super team getting together to release this crazy compendium of games. And again, we had this kind of clear purpose, which was, okay, in this age of online multiplayer, where everyone's thinking about online multiplayer, let's bring it back old school, people on the same couch together in the same living room playing games. So this idea of local multiplayer was this very clear narrative behind this game. So we got together and you know, Sony had seen our games at different exhibitions, and they were very interested in the games, but we didn't really have the money to front the production costs. So what we did is we went to Kickstarter, which is I'm sure as many of you are aware, a crowdfunding site where fans can say, oh, I'm interested in this idea, here I'll give you money to make the game. So we got over 4,000 people to back the game, and we made enough money, which is really amazing, that allowed us to hire proper programmers and designers and so forth to actually produce this game for the PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4. And you know, this is actually quite a large amount of money to raise on Kickstarter, and it was kind of possible because the 4 of us had spent so much time building a fan base, showing this game in public, and getting together as this big team. So together, we were able to do this bigger project that none of us could have done alone. So we got the money and we started working on the game. We decided to keep polishing the games and get them ready and put them together in this nice package in a unified menu system. And what was really cool about this project was it wasn't done as a traditional studio. So it was done under my studio, Gute Fabrik, and I was the producer of the game. But the guys I worked with, you know, Ramiro, Noah, and Bennett, they weren't part of my studio. They were collaborators. And in fact, they were in complete creative control of their own game. So even though I was publishing this title, they got to make all the creative decisions on their own individual game. And so this was really cool. It was a nice compromise between, we got to work in a larger team structure, but rather than having there's this idea of design by committee, and if there's too many people trying to design the same game, people argue and it's hard to kind of make really interesting, radical games. But instead, we gave each person their own piece of the game and said, this is your game, do whatever you want, we can't, you know, that's your creative project, I can't influence what you do. So this was a really cool, I think, way of working. Both, it allowed us to work in a bigger team, but also give us individual control over our own smaller games. So that was really nice. We released the game in May, got cool reviews, and that was really great, and that was a real honor. And so it was all very gratifying, and you know, we're really proud of the game. Okay, so then thinking about this story about Sportsfriends. There's this idea here, you know, again, about like hanging out with other developers and why that matters. And so here's a cool screenshot I dug out. This is in 2011. I'm still in Copenhagen at the time, and that's Ramiro, and we're having a Skype conversation. And I had just played Hokra for the first time, and I was like, oh my god, this game is amazing. We got to call Ramiro and tell him, you know, why we like this game so much. So we call Ramiro and we start telling him, oh, we just played Hokra, we love this game. note, at the time, I had zero clue I would ever team up with this guy or we would make this PlayStation game. It was mostly just excited to talk to this interesting guy who had made this amazing game. And you know, that's really cool to think of. Then we stayed in touch, and then over the years ended up making this PlayStation game together. That's crazy. I never would have expected that. And you know, I think it's easier to come up with new and exciting ideas when you have somebody to brainstorm with. When you're working with a really respected colleague or friend, and you're trading ideas back and forth, and you're getting excited and building something together. And I think the really key point here, and maybe this is the most important point I have to give, is it's really, games aren't just a business, right? They're also an artistic practice, a creative practice. And being creative is actually pretty difficult, and you never know where good ideas are going to come from. And you can't always force good ideas. Sometimes good ideas, creative ideas, come when you least expect them. So you can't know when good ideas are going to come, but you can create the conditions in which good ideas are more likely to happen. And so just hanging out with other cool developers all the time, whether it's over Skype or in person over beers or at conferences or whatever, makes it more likely that together you might think of cool ideas together. And so, you know, I think we tend to think of business networking like, oh, I have this game I want to make. I guess I better go get business contacts that can help me publish this game. Actually, I think networking at its best is really just hanging out with cool people. And if you do that enough, like, good things will often happen from that social mix. And also, you know, Sportsfriends hammers home this idea of building something larger than yourself, right? So in today's world, it's very difficult to stand out as a solo developer. There's so many people making games, small games, large games. But by coming together, we were able to do something that we wouldn't have been able to do on our own. And this idea of this like super team gave us more visibility, and it got the press interested, and it was exciting for us. It gave us a sense of purpose, this idea of local multiplayer. This is something we care about, and we're going to bring back, and we're going to work together to do this thing. So again, it's like creating something bigger than our own selves was really important. Okay, finally, last story. This story is quite different, and so here's another even more different take on collaboration. And it's about my friend Niklas Nygren, who's a Swedish game developer, most famously known as Niklas. Is the name. You may have heard of him before. So I first met Niklas at a game jam in Sweden called No More Sweden. This was back in 2009. And essentially, No More Sweden is an annual summer meetup / game jam for indies in the Scandinavian region. So Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and so forth. So I went and I met this guy, Niklas, who had made this game called Knud. I don't know if you've ever played it. It's a free game. It's amazing. It's one of my all-time favorite games. I really, really highly recommend this game. If you've never played it before, you can download it for free on this website. And this is, so before I met him, I had already played this game, and I loved it. This was like one of my all-time favorite games. So I was blown away to meet this guy. He was like an absolute hero of mine. And I was almost even too shy to talk to him at first. I was like, oh my God, that's Niklas, that's the guy who made the clip. And you know, over the course of the weekend, we got to know the people at this conference, and even ended up going out to dinner with Niklas, and that was like amazing. I was going to dinner with this hero of mine who had made one of my favorite games. But we got along really well, and I was, you know, after that weekend, I was like, oh, you should come visit us in Copenhagen, which was not it was a close train ride from where we were in Sweden. And he was like, yeah, that sounds really fun. I guess I'll change my train tickets and just come back with you to Denmark for a week to visit, and then I'll go back to Sweden, where he lived at the time. So you know, it was amazing. Suddenly he was hanging out with us in Denmark and visiting us. And over the years, he came back a lot for events in Copenhagen to give talks and exhibitions, and we became better and better friends. We started even working together collaboratively. So he did the music and the sound for this game Button. He also did the sound for this game, the Johann Sebastian Joust. So I don't know if you heard it, but when they registered their controller and some of the sounds, that's all sound design by my friend Niklas. Eventually he even moved to Copenhagen and shared an apartment with me for a year before I live in New York now. I recently moved back to New York. And so suddenly I was roommates with this guy. And so this is just like totally crazy. Because here's this, hero of mine, and I get to know him and then even move in with him. And here's us, we play video games every night. It's one of our favorite games called Spelunky. I was thinking about this recently, and it sounds kind of cheesy, but at the end of the day, it's these kinds of relationships and getting to meet people you really respect and working together with them that matter to me way more than any of the awards or the money or the company or like whatever. Right? It's this that's actually kind of why I personally make games. And so the theme here is that like thinking about collaboration not as a means to an end, like, okay, I want to build this business, so I'll hire this team, but collaboration itself as the thing. So instead of like, I'm going to collaborate so that we can make a better game, the idea here is like, let's make a game just as an activity that's really good at getting cool people to get together to work together on really cool things. So again, this idea of like collaboration isn't a tool, it's actually the thing that I enjoy most out of making games. Right? Like games is a perfect site for collaboration because they're very cross-disciplinary. Right? You need a programmer and artist and a sound designer, maybe a game designer, a business person. Games require so many different types of people that it's a perfect kind of avenue for doing collaborative work with different types of people. Okay, so final conclusions. Obviously these are just 3 examples from my life, and how you all will collaborate is kind of going to look different. There isn't one correct way to collaborate. I've also been very privileged to be able to travel around and live in different places in the world, and not everyone can do that. But there are so many ways to collaborate, to get involved, whether that's online with online colleagues or here just local, in your local community, in your city. And so, even though I just kind of told you these long 3 stories, the point here isn't necessarily these exact models of collaborating, but just this idea in general of collaborating and kind of inspiring you all to think about what that means and how you might go about getting involved and collaborating with people. I also want to note, in this talk I've been very optimistic. I'm kind of maybe guilty of romanticizing collaboration. Close collaboration is really, really hard and doesn't always work out, right? You can clashing egos or work habits maybe aren't incompatible. Maybe your interests end up diverging from the people you're working with. Sometimes a collaboration that used to work well, for whatever reason, stops working well, and then you have to go find new collaborators. And so, I want to point out that collaboration is not easy. It's something kind of like a marriage or relationship. It's something that you have to work at. It doesn't always work out. But when it does work out, it is extremely gratifying, and to me, it makes it really worth all the bumps along the way. So yeah, here's me and Heather, Sportsfriends. I'm still really good friends with them, and yeah, I think more than anything with this PlayStation game we made, I'm most proud of being able to work with all these incredibly talented people. So yeah, that's basically it. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions either now or after the talk. Thanks.
OK， 那因为我们这场就是还有一些时间，请大家稍微想一下有没有什么问题想要发问。那我们会有现场的工作朋友帮忙递麦克风到你手上。有没有人现在就要问问题了？如果没有的话，我先帮大家问一个问题。好，这边哪边？
Hi Doc, thanks for coming to Taipei and sharing your successful story with us. I actually saw your TV commercial from IGN website. When I first saw the Johann Sebastian Just, I actually quite surprised because there are not many party games on PlayStation.
Yeah.
And the art style is the old school AP style. And I don't quite understand the mechanism at that time, but thanks for the show today. Now I got the mechanism.
Yeah.
My question is quite simple. As I saw from the slide, the Just game is set in 18th century. Is there any classic story behind why you name your game as Johann Sebastian?
Yeah. Sorry, I should have explained that better. Let me. Yeah. So, I don't know if you heard it in the back, but it was Johann Sebastian Bach's music. This famous composer from a few centuries ago. And I really love his music, but I think it works really, so in the game it plays music, and when the music is very slow, the controller is very sensitive to motion. When the music is fast, it speeds up, you can go a little faster. And I liked Johann Sebastian Bach's music because it kind of gave this Baroque feeling of a duel of German aristocrats or something dueling, and so that's the reason for the name and the theme. But you can actually also put in your own MP3s and do it with your own music as well.
那还有没有下一个问题？那我先问一个好了，大家再想一下。So Doc, I'll ask one question. Yeah. When you are working on these experimental projects and you're doing these collaborations, how do you actually make a living?
Well, I guess that was kind of the what I was trying to get across in the talk. I mean, now we kind of sell these games on PlayStation, so I make a living now as an independent developer. But this was a very long road. So we were doing this as students. I was a PhD student, and so, or a lot of us had other jobs. So, like I said, it didn't happen overnight. We had to build these projects while either in school or doing other jobs. And over the years, we kind of got more experience, more contacts, and finally, it got us to this point, where we could. For me, it was launching this PlayStation game. My colleagues launched this Wii U game. But right, it didn't happen overnight. That took us a very long, several years of building this body of work. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm very fortunate that I'm to that point. But I mean, Rami kind of talked about this too. It's not like, okay, we're going to make a company and start making money immediately. It was a very slow process.
还没有其他 follow up 的问题？那边有吗？机会难得哦。
No, that's okay as well.
Hi, Doug. So you mentioned that you're working with, I guess, people from different countries, and I know collaboration across different time zones.
Yeah.
You don't have a lot of face-to-face interaction. What are what would you say the biggest challenges are?
Yeah.
For collaborating remotely, and how do you deal with it?
Yeah, it's been really difficult, to be honest. Some of these games were done, like the Copenhagen Game Collective, we were in person together in Copenhagen. Sportsfriends, I actually ended up moving back to New York to work with some of these other designers who were in New York. On the projects we're working on now, though, I have to do a lot remotely with these European colleagues. We make sure to meet on Skype every day at the same time, literally every day, or every weekday, work day, to try to just always be talking. We have an IM conversation open that we're talking through during the workday. And I still go back to Denmark quite a lot. Like I'll go for a month to work in a concentrated month with my friends, so we'll all get together somewhere. So yeah, no, it's been really, really challenging. Like I said, it wasn't like, okay, I'm gonna go build a team to make this game. All right, I'll hire people in the area. It was more like, okay, me and my friends want to make this game together. Ah, crap, we live in different countries. I guess we'll make it work. And so it was, the first goal was to, I want to make games with those particular friends. And so we just try to figure out a way to make it work. But yeah, I think for me, doing Skype conversations and traveling a lot, like we'll also meet each other at different conferences that we go to. And we're fortunate that we're able to do that. So.
那有没有接下来问题 So I can ask one more question. So what is the biggest difficulties that you encountered when you are doing these collaborative works or when you are making games? What's the biggest difficulties you ever encountered?
And it's hard to isolate just one. Like I said, working with people can obviously, just like a relationship, can be very, very difficult. I'm trying to think of like specific stories to give you. I guess I will say that's I really like how we all the way at the end of like I really like how in Sportsfriends we were each given total control over our own specific game. We all had to talk about and agree on all the major, like the business decisions, the menus and everything. So we made sure that the four of us, whenever we made a decision about the game, that we were all on board. And of course then you're spending hours and hours discussing all the time. And that's very time consuming, but I think it's important that all four of us were always happy with what was going on with the game. But I think it really helped in this project specifically that this idea of the compendium is really nice because we were given creative control. And so if we were all four of us designing all the games together, we would probably be arguing about the creative decisions all the time. So instead, this was almost like putting us in 4 different silos. Was a really nice way of collaborating, but still having full individual control. And sometimes like I said, a collaboration works really well for a few years, and then it's time to move on to a different idea or a different group of collaborators. So maybe it's also knowing when a certain idea makes sense and knowing when to move on. There's again like a lot of bumps and hurt feelings along the way, but you take it one step at a time, and you try to be a good human being, and you learn lessons as you go. But again, this gets to this idea I was saying that this takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. Also like a marriage or a relationship, it happens slowly. You learn how to do it. You learn who you want to collaborate with and who you don't. And this is the reason game jams, for example, are so useful. They give you an opportunity to work with somebody just for a weekend, and then you think, did it work? Did I like working with this person? Or maybe we weren't compatible. But it's much nicer to learn that in a 48-hour game jam than it is like when you've already formed a company together. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that's why I'm saying there's other ways to collaborate than just making a company with people or hiring people. And some of those lower risk ways that let you build up slowly over time, like game jams, like some of these other art collectives or whatever I talked about. And I think that's valuable in terms of slowly teaching you how to collaborate and who you want to collaborate with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
好，那如果没有其他问题的话，我们这一场，
我想请问一下，那请问你们在合作的过程中有没有发生像各一方的进度已经延误，然后无论如何都没有办法联络上，怎么联络不上的状况？对，因为我自己还蛮常发生这种事情，那困扰我蛮久，甚至有失踪3个月半以上。对，这样子。
So this poor guy had a problem that his collaborator lost contact with him, and didn't respond to him like even for like 3 months. And how do you deal with that, or how do you suggest him do something about it?
I don't know. I think I mean, unfortunately, this happened and it sucks. Like, there's no way around it. It's like, it's awful. You know, obviously it makes you feel bad. I think, you know, sometimes you just have to move on. And obviously you have to try to be a nice human being. It's easy to be like, fuck you, and try to like, but you want to be kind of professional about it. And, you know, who knows if this person is going through problems or something. But this is what I mean. It's like, once you've reached that point, I mean, I don't know how long you've been working on the game for, but once you reach that point, it's almost already too late. And this is why building trust over time is important. And that's why I meant like small game jams and small projects, and you keep building up is important. You know, just like you've been dating somebody for a week, you wouldn't marry them after a week, right? Because like, you know, or maybe you would, but that sounds kind of risky because, you know, it takes time to build up trust. And that's why I like I said, game jams and this idea of multiple small projects. Specifically for you right now, yeah, I don't know, maybe, you know, also trying to get the person to figure out why did you disappear? Is there something that we can do to, because Rami got at this a little bit. Making games is very stressful, and oftentimes maybe you're not making money or you're working very long hours, and maybe the game isn't coming along very well. Making games can be very, very, very stressful, especially when you're running your own company. And I go through this myself all the time. And some people deal with stress in different ways. You know, some people just have a breakdown and don't want to think about it and just disappear for a few months. I don't know if that's what happened, but I've seen it happen to other people. And I mean, maybe part of this is also, you know, I think if development is becoming too unsustainable, or you're working too hard, or it's feeling unhealthy and stressful, before it reaches that breaking point where the person breaks off and just stops talking to you for 3 months, sometimes when you feel the process, okay, this isn't fun anymore, this is getting stressful, it's worth taking a step back and being like, okay, well, what can we do about this? Because you also don't want to work yourself into the ground. I mean, like I said, making independent games is a very long process, and so you need it to be sustainable so that you can do it for multiple years, not burn yourself out in a year or two. So, I hope it works out, but I think it's also looking back, and now maybe in the future when you find collaborators, figuring out how to build that trust slowly in low-risk ways.
好，那这场我们的活动大概就进行到这边。好，那再次感谢这个 Douglas。Thank you。好，因为他刚提到 Game Jam 那么多次，就跟大家提醒一下，我们明天下午有一场就是专门讲 Game Jam 的 session， 请大家记得来听。
好，那我们上午的场次就到这边结束。我们下午的场次是下午1点半开始，那就是请特别注意，我们下午场次会开2边，这边会保留这一区跟这一区，然后这边会把它隔起来。那另外一边的话是开403跟404打通2个场地一起做演讲，所以请记得把各位随身的东西带走。那外面有很多就是这次有来参与的合作伙伴，他们有摊位，有空可以去上面让你看一下。